over to you guys.
Thank you very much, Rose, Sarah, Ludovine, everyone that's worked hard to bring this week out into the world. I must say I have a bit of FOMO because, well, past FOMO, because I was at the South African Mining Indaba the past few weeks. I came back last night, and I have a sneaky suspicion that there were a bit more thought-provoking thoughts shared here than I was able to pick up where I was in person. So I will definitely be going to review some of the videos that you've posted. I've already introduced myself, and so has Antoine. And today we want to ask a question of the industry and say what would it look like if we can bring mining stakeholder engagement into the digital era? And I'm not just talking about people on smartphones in Europe or in Johannesburg. I'm talking about rural people and people who might only have a very simple feature phone or not be literate. How will that change the dynamics in mining stakeholder engagement? To introduce the topic, I'll tell you a little bit more about a project I had the privilege to be involved in, and where I've learned quite a few lessons in digital stakeholder engagement. The project was deployed in 2017 in rural South Africa in Limpopo province, and why the project was born in the first place was because there was serious trouble in those mining communities with information gatekeeping. There were structures in place within the company, but also within the communities, and it was not in their best interest that the normal stakeholder on the ground receive information in real time. So at that time, it was fashion to say there must be an app for it. So that is what we did. We created a browser-based app that people with a very simple smartphone could access. But then, big issue, where will they find the data, the Wi-Fi to do this? So the company at that time deployed over 20 free Wi-Fi hotspots, similar to what you would have in your home, and then had a training program to show people the basic digital literacy skills that they would need to access this. So in that sentence already can branch out to lots of lessons learned, but what I want to stick to for the purpose of this conversation is two observations. The first observation is the incredible power of access to information. Someone who's able to take his phone, his smartphone, his feature phone, and access an opportunity without having to rely on power structures or other people to provide that opportunity or to provide the information about that opportunity to them. So that's the first thing. The second thing is was an unintended consequence of the deployment of this program, and is a little bit on another topic, but it has to be mentioned because it was revolutionary to see. What happens if a mining company decides to make digital infrastructure available to the host communities? Will they use that digital infrastructure to just badmouth the mining company on Facebook? Or will they actually try to actively improve their own lives and their own socioeconomic self-sustainability? And what we have found through this program and the data that we could generate behind the scenes is a resounding I will use it to improve my own life. In the end, we had 36,000 subscribers or unique users. And over a period of 18 months, they accessed the opportunity tab or button over 1.6 million times. That's 36,000 people just showing the sheer willpower and the sheer desperation. Is there an opportunity for me that I can access here? So I think the time is right to bring mining, community stakeholder engagement into the digital era. At the moment, we're seeing a few barriers, and Antoine and I will speak about that a little bit later. But technology, software, ability, the capability to do this is definitely there. And that is where Antoine and the software that he's been working on and developing is just an incredible tool that we are able to harness to bring mining stakeholder engagement into the digital era. So Antoine, let me give you an opportunity to tell us more about Ulula.
So I think to give another point to what Lisl was saying, maybe some of you know that more people own cell phones than toothbrushes, and that may say something about our society, but it also just pragmatically tells you, the opportunity that lies ahead of you when you want to engage through mobile phones. And so the idea is, how do you systematize that, and how do you adapt to all the context that mining takes place, which is, as we know, can be very last mile. So behind the idea of how do you tap into the billions of people that are on cell phones, I mean, there are at least three things that we've been trying to do to make it work, right? One is that you need to go beyond smartphones. You have to be inclusive, otherwise you're just going to reproduce the exclusion and the fact that only the loudest mouth speak, and that's definitely not the idea. The idea is, how do you democratize? The second is that, as we know, sadly, I think mining can be a dangerous business for the people who open their mouths sometimes. And there's been activists that have been on the wrong side of that in some places, particularly on the environmental side. So how do you protect people who speak up, the whistleblowers, the workers, the communities? And so anonymity has to be at the fundamental of that. Otherwise, the data you get and the communications are not going to be trustworthy. People are not going to tell you what they really think. And the last thing I think that we've been really focused on is, how do you make it two-way? I mean, it would be ironical that an industry that's called extractive also extracts data from people without closing the loop, right? And so the way it works is that you have to really facilitate a two-way conversation to create the trust and give some agency to people. So, and how we've been using that, I mean, to give examples is, clearly in the context of COVID, when you can't send your community relations people on the ground, or you have to renegotiate your environmental impact assessment, then I think that these types of tools have gained even more traction than before, because we can run surveys and connect with thousands of people at a very low cost and very simply. And do that more often. So that's an example. In grievances, I think, is also a big example. And as you may have heard from other, and we'll hear about the Brussels bubble. The Brussels bubble has produced a directive on human rights due diligence that needs to be fully agreed upon. But you see that exercising due diligence, meaning having effective grievance mechanism, is becoming paramount for all businesses, but mining being one that is really at the core of that. So that's another reason why it's really important. And just providing the data to empower people, whether you're a communications person trying to talk to your engineers or communicating out to the investors, I think has been really what the technology can give you, and something that we've been doing for 8 years. So it's not like it's not just a newbie on the ground. It's something that we have quite a few lessons learned about. So at the same time, technology is just a tool. It's not going to change the fundamentals of the power relations per se. You have to use the data. You have to make the best of that opportunity. And so that's why this partnership with LIFA and is really fundamental. And perhaps we can continue with that.
Thank you, Antoine. One of the I was speaking with Danielle from the ICMM Social Performance on a panel at the Mining Indaba, and she told this beautiful story, and the picture just stays in my mind. So I want to share it with you, courtesy to Danielle. She was in Papua New Guinea, and she was outside the mining area, standing on a beach. And she was watching 3 or 4 women in a very precarious canoe paddling. And finally, she realized, paddling towards the mining area, finally she realized what they were up to. They were holding their feature phones, their cell phones up, so that they could embrace or harness the connectivity that the mine made available only for themselves. And when she was able to talk to them afterwards through a translator, they said, but they went to do their cell phone banking on a precarious canoe in the middle of the ocean, trying to catch a signal. That is the power of being able to connect. And it was through USSD. It wasn't smartphones or data. It was SMS based. So Antoine shared the importance of software is just a tool. It's as good as the data that we can feed it. It's as good as the activation or the implementation that we can give it. So at LIFA, we've been taking a step back in terms of reporting. I think that the mining industry, especially the big players, are exceptionally good at reporting upwards. They push out glossies. It's beautiful. And there's fancy online portals for ESG information. But there's a huge gap. There is only 180-degree reporting excellence. What about those people that are most affected by the impacts of mining, not getting the same type of attention in terms of reporting on impacts, reporting on ESG parameters? From my experience, it's a resounding no. They're not. They are not getting the granularity that investors, etc., are able to harness from a website. And in mining host communities, who's becoming more and more sophisticated, more and more hyper-connected, when they open and they have enough data to open those same glossies, some of that is news to them, or heaven forbid, it contradicts the information that the mining community relations staff member gives them on the ground. So where's the truth? And what's the result of that? Trust is lost because the message is not consistent. So in short, LIFA 360 has a big vision, has a dream to be able to make the ESG, the information about the mining company available with a 360 view. Same information that investors, etc., are able to see. How do we translate that into chunks of information that community members can receive in a channel that they are comfortable with? So when we talk about the Ulula LIFA 360 partnership, there's a few elements that LIFA 360 brings to Ulula that's needed for successful uptake or use. The first of all is a digital engagement strategy. I don't know how many of you have children in school, but schools are notoriously bad with having a integrated and comprehensive digital engagement strategy. I am on 4 WhatsApp groups for one child in one grade, and I have 6 children. So it would be a full-time job to keep track of all the digital channels. So same for a mining company. They need an integrated digital engagement strategy. And then there must be some kind of implementation of these plans, including on community level, which would take an activation campaign to help them use a tool like Ulula and get used to it. And then very often, and we'll get to this on the next slide, there's a sentence about it. When I talk to mining executives about using digital strategies in community engagement, they would say to me, but wait, we're going to give our power away. This makes us uncomfortable. We can't control the messages that goes out. And in that very statement, in my view, they are giving away their power, because they're giving away an incredibly powerful tool to get data about social risk in mining. Because the same information that your stakeholders are able to give you through a digital tool, the same the same two-way communication that Ulula enables, creates metadata or data about data that can indicate risk to a mining company. And then I challenged them and I said, okay, guys, you mine of the future. I'm seeing the control room. Oh, it's sexy. Oh, it's beautiful. Where is the social dashboard in that mine of the future? The real-time stakeholder information that the technology is there. It can be generated. It's a matter of will. And then once the data is available and we have been able to really listen to our stakeholders through digital and face-to-face means and integrate that information into trends. What is this really saying to us? Is the relationship improving? What's the hot topics? What's the buttons, etc., and report that back to the company, but also to the stakeholders who's providing this data. So on our last slide, we've just thought a little bit about what are barriers. If we're living in a digital era, if everything is going into the fourth industrial revolution, what are barriers to implementing digital stakeholder engagement? And Antoine, maybe you want to first highlight implementing this, and then I can conclude.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief so that we have questions, because we're running out of time, I realize. So I think the first is really to emphasize the message that it's not about substituting people. It's just that no company will be ubiquitous and have ears and eyes everywhere at times. So it's more like, how do you gather intelligence so that you can allocate human bodies to at the best time in the best places. So it's really trying to be smarter rather than to be distracted. The second, I think, is that you have this fear of losing control, and the point is, it's happening whether you like it or not, right? So the question is, how do you really get to create a dialogue that is more inclusive, and not just have like the anti-mining and the PR machines, affronting each other and trying to really foster something that's a little more genuine and where you hear some of the voices that you would miss otherwise. So I think that's that. And the third, I think, is really what we already said, is that it's not just about having a little app in Android or iOS. It's about actually the other way is going through SMS, through voice, to get to the literate people, to get to the people in their language so that we can hear them out, because these are the people that are critical to making sure that the impact that you're proclaiming to have is really going to be there. Otherwise, you're just leaving them behind.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lisl and Antoine. So exciting what you guys are putting together here. Brilliant. Round of applause, everybody, for the fabulous Lisl and Antoine. Absolutely brilliant. I've got so many messages coming in at me from different devices at the moment. So my little smartphone, which yes only works if I stand on one leg, sort of angled in a slightly northerly direction with the wind blowing in a certain way. So with this, and I know that the questions will come through to you later. I'm loving the fact where there's a kind of translation or making the information real for people. Has anybody done a study where they've kind of gone to the financiers and they've gone to different communities and everyone said, well, what information do you think, do you want? And then actually shown that to one another? Because so often the financiers ask us for information and we're like, why on earth do you want that? The real thing that you need is this. And that's why. Has anybody done all of that cross mapping of the information?
I would love to see a study on that. But I think it happens in companies who use the GRI method of reporting when they do their materiality assessment. But it is not packaged in the way that you have asked the question.
Yeah.
The materiality assessment is done on granular level. It's then taken up to corporate where it's nice and sanitized. And then, but what you're asking is in there, but we don't have access to that or haven't seen it packaged the way that you've asked it.
Yeah, because it might just, I don't know, create a little bit of empathy between the different groups, if nothing else, which would be really cool. Zach, you've got your hand up. Do you want to come in on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's I wouldn't say this is a broad, widespread study, but certainly one of the mines in Limpopo did a great piece of work where they had they got local unemployed sorry, I forget it's an international audience. Limpopo is a province in South Africa. Sorry. They're one of the big platinum mines. They hired local unemployed graduates and gave them an iPad, and they hired them to actually go and speak to each individual household and capture what their concerns were about the mine. And the way they did it was they broke it down to 2 questions. What do you like about the mine? What don't you like about the mine? And then, at that point, you get into kind of where Lisl and Antoine are talking, because they then gathered all that data and went through a whole process of saying, okay. And what was really great there was that, they learned a lot about what people were saying about them and wanted to say about them. But then it comes down to 5 or 6 things. It's always only a handful of things that are really big issues. And they could then go back and individually respond to each of those. So I'm conscious that's not a broad scale survey of exactly what everybody wants. But I think my point is it may not be useful to do that either, because these communities are not monolithic, and they're certainly not all the same all over the world. They're not even the same village to village to village, but that individual interaction changed the way that they spoke to their communities.
Awesome. Thanks very much for that, Zach. That's a great addition. Johannes, do you want to come in?
Yes, I love your survey question, Sarah. This is really needed, and I'm aware of a couple of things that might have been done. So I will post links later. I have been involved in some research that was funded by the European Union, where we went as far as looking at what are some of the big clumps of stakeholders asking for. So we looked at global reporting initiatives, we looked at mining certification schemes, and then we looked, for example, at the practice of life cycle assessment. And we saw indeed there is a mismatch. Some of these schemes are very much asking what the consumer on the high street wants to know, and others are really focusing on what the host community wants to know, and they're not the same. So I can post a link to an open source paper on that. The other example I know of is, again, funded by the EU, a research project that has put together a proposal for another certification scheme for the mining of minerals. But they took the approach of recognizing that there will be different demands at different stages along the value chain. So they produced a set of 4 distinct standards that must be connected for the mineral production to be sort of certified as okay. And so that's quite interesting, because they will have gathered then the requirements of each standard will be tailored to the stakeholders of each step in the value chain. And I would imagine there that you see a contrast. And when I post that link, you may see that there's an open consultation on that set of standards with comments due by end of June. So that's an opportunity for attendees to engage and contribute.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Johannes. Ludovine, I know that you want to chip in on this discussion as well.
Thanks. I'm veering a little bit away from your question, but I just wanted to perhaps connect some dots. You may remember in February, Rio Tinto came out with a fairly brutal assessment of its corporate culture. I'm not pointing fingers at Rio Tinto because, quite frankly, they put on paper what is prevalent across the industry, and they did it in a very brave way. One of the things that really struck me is that beyond the limited discussion, there was really a huge point that was made about a structural weakness in our industry, which is the huge silos and the complete disconnect from corporate headquarters to operations. And the fact that this allows little fiefdoms to exist, which are really a law unto themselves. And I was particularly struck by what you were saying, Lisl, of the power of information to break down those barriers and to literally explode the sort of little power of little chiefs in their bubble. Because once you have information that's not only bilateral, but it actually becomes multilateral, because everybody can not only come into it, but also take something out of it. I think that's one of the best uses for information. One of the sessions we had this week was about the fact that information itself has no value. It's how you use it that's important, that's relevant, that's important. So I'm trying to also connect the dots to the fact that beyond answering a need, this is a huge opportunity for a major culture change. And seeing as that element of culture has caused us, frankly, to be the worst versions of ourselves in many cases, I'm slightly hopeful from your presentation. So that was just my 2 cents. And I can see that Antoine already has things to add. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ludovine. Antoine, let's come to yourself, and then we'll go to Lisl for any final comments, and then Johannes will be on to you. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Brilliant. Antoine, over to yourself.
Yeah, just to pick up on Ludovine's point. So I think there are 2 elements here that where technology provides like very specific value. One is, as you say, it's like it creates accountability through breaking the information silos, so you can have like corporate to site and then to third parties also that are maybe trusted by women in this case, and something that we do in many industries, where what we found, for instance, is compared to sending an auditor to a factory saying, is there sexual harassment? When you use mobile phones, you get up to 30 times more detection of sexual harassment. And why? I mean, it's not about magic. It's first because you're not interviewing 20 people, you're just getting hundreds or thousands depending on the size. And second is like if I show up with a nice suit and ask like, are you being, do you face harassment? You will not trust me, and you will be much more truthful. I mean, this in psychological studies, with your phone than with your a stranger, right? And so there are, the example of Rio Tinto, as you say, it's brave, but it's something we see across many industries and many sectors. So that's where there are interesting properties within technology that I think can make the voices heard in a more effective way and facilitate remediation at the end. As you say, information alone is useless. Then how do you translate that into remediation for women in this case and for others in other circumstances?
Awesome. Thank you very much for that, Antoine. Great. Lisl, do you have any final comments?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Ludovine and Antoine. I think in that vein, for those who don't work a lot on ground level in rural communities, easy to underestimate the intimidation that is going on in mining host communities. I think to use mobile phone technology that has an option of anonymity to say what you want to say and not be put on the spot or intimidated has a huge potential to filter out the noise of intimidation, not just by the mind, also by structures within those mining host communities. Thanks again for the opportunity and looking forward to listening to the rest of the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Lisl and Antoine. Massive round of applause. Absolutely brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you very, very much.